Hey everybody, it's 3 o'clock, it's Tuesday, that means it's Tech Tuesday. Today I'm going to be talking about some of the latest things that are going on in the broadband industry, so the latest broadband news. I'll be right back. Thanks for joining me. I'm Rick Uzzi here at Z-Quorum, and again today we're going to be talking about some of the latest things going on in broadband news, and this would be news that would be maybe most relevant to broadband providers, communication services providers. So let's dive right in there and see what's going on. So first off, we've got some news with RDOFF. That's the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. This is a auction. It's really a reverse auction that the FCC is going to be doing to auction off funds where service providers can get funds for areas that are underserved or unserved, really unserved to start out with in phase one for the FCC auction. And unserved would be areas that do not have a customer that gets at least 25 megabits per second down, 3 megabits per second up. All you need is one, and that would give you the designation of served in that area. But if there's nobody that can get that, then it's unserved, and there have been a lot of developments here in the last week, one of which is that the final eligible areas list has been released. Now, there's not been a lot of changes to this. The eligible areas, originally they had come out before, earlier in the year, and it was a lot of areas that were considered eligible for this auction. And then a lot of challenges came out. So as service providers saw the list, and that list was like a year and a half old, they were objecting to that and said, well, wait a minute now, since that time that you looked at this, we've introduced broadband in that area that is over 25/3 or at least 25/3. So there's a lot of challenges. So in June, they came out with a revised list that took into account a lot of those challenges. And this last and final list is, there's not that many differences in this. So this is just basically the final list of eligible areas prior to the auction beginning. And that will be happening October 29th as far as that auction goes. And another development, so the FCC just announced the bidders that have qualified for the RDOFF auction. The short form application had to be in by, I think it was July 25th, and so those who were going to be bidding had to get their application in by then. And then the FCC reviewed those, and they came out with a list of those who had their applications approved and those that were considered incomplete. And then the folks that were incomplete had an opportunity to make adjustments to that based on the feedback from the FCC, and then they could have resubmitted that by another deadline. So that has now passed, and the FCC has now announced that there are 386 bidders for this first round of this RDOFF auction. 386 have qualified, and again, that auction is on October 29th. And by the way, there's a few links that on the video here. If you go down below, I pinned a comment with a couple of prior broadcasts, one of which is on RDOFF. So if you want to know more about RDOFF, you can certainly click that and watch that broadcast. Again, you're too late to do anything about it now because the short form application period has closed and all of the bidders, those that can bid, have been selected. But if you want to know more about this for whatever reason, maybe opportunities that you might want to consider for those that are going to be bidding, you've got that video that you can watch where you can learn more about that. The FCC said the number of qualified bidders represented more than 75% increase in the number of bidders that were in the 2018 Connect America Fund, or CAF2. And that was a auction, very similar, reverse auction, descending clock, works very much like the RDOFF is going to work that way. So RDOFF is kind of like the next version of CAF2, and it again starts on October 29th. So this is a lot bigger than CAF2 was. There's like 14 times the amount of money. It's like $20 billion, I believe it is, with $16 billion in the first round. So this is a lot of money, and a lot of companies have put in that they want to bid for this. So on October 29th, the auction will start. Again, reverse auction, descending clock. You can learn more about that if you click the link below about RDOFF. And here you can see, you can go to the FCC website and get a lot of information about this also, but you can see here, these are the companies that have, and I'm obviously not going to show you everyone, but these are the companies that have gotten approved applications that are set to bid. And then there's also a list of those that did not qualify as well. So this is interesting and kind of related. So SpaceX has just launched 60 more satellites into space, and this is ahead of their public beta. They've already done a trial with various subscribers. I don't know if you call it an alpha. I guess it was still a beta, but it's like a limited, not a public beta. And it says they're nearing their 800 satellite target for providing moderate internet coverage over North America. So this is really a big deal. This is not pie in the sky or satellites in the sky. This is something that's really happening, and it's really happening now. It says after the last batch of 60 Starlink satellites, that now brings them to a Starlink constellation of 788. So they're right close to the 800 that they need. They could probably do it now, but maybe they want to get over that 800. And this is low Earth orbit satellites. Again, there's a link below where I did a broadcast about low Earth orbit satellites, and specifically I covered a lot of SpaceX and what they're doing, because they're the ones that are actually launching a lot of satellites right now. So they launch these constellations, they're at low Earth orbit, and because of that, their latency is very good, because if you've ever had satellite internet, usually that's, or really always, that's with a geosynchronous satellite that's like 30 to 40,000 miles up in space, whereas these low Earth ones are more like 300 or so miles in space, and that seems like a long way, but it's really not. And because of that, the latency is much, much lower with what you'd find with a normal satellite internet connection. And a lot of that is traveling through space, which is one reason that it's low latency. So it's fairly close to the ground relative to other satellites, and a lot of that signal is traveling through space, a vacuum of space. So they're getting good results from this. It says the Starlink team continues to test the system, collecting latency and performance speed tests of the service. In fact, Washington's State Military Emergency Management Unit began using 7 Starlink end-user terminals in August as part of its response to rebuild fire-ravaged parts of the state. So where the fires are going on there, they're now using this service, probably in hard-to-reach areas, and they've got these terminals that they're testing out. Elon Musk calls those like a UFO and a stick, so I haven't really seen one yet, but it probably looks like that. It's probably a stick with a kind of a dome UFO-looking thing on the top of it. And it says here, and this is important, last week SpaceX was confirmed to have qualified to bid for the FCC RDOFF funds, which I was just talking about. So that's really interesting, because most of this, really all of the service providers, unless you're satellite or wireless, I guess, didn't think about that, but if you're doing some kind of wired service, then you are going to need to lay fiber probably to these areas. So that's part of what these funds will do. The FCC is going to make these funds available, and that will help defray the costs as they get these funds over 10 years. Then these operators can go out and lay fiber and do the things that they need to do to be able to provide broadband to some hard-to-reach areas. And again, that's over 10 years. And the FCC is, they're making it most attractive for people that can provide 1 gigabit service with very low latency. And that low latency was not really that low. It was like less than 125 milliseconds. So 1 gig and then less than 125 milliseconds, and then your bid is not really weighted down. Now, Starlink should be able to hit the low latency as long as the FCC, believes that they can do that. By the time that they're going to be bidding on this, they actually can do that. Their speeds probably won't get up to 1 gig, but they've gotten good speeds as well. You can see here recent demonstrating download speeds recently of 102 megabits per second to 103 megabits per second, and then upload speeds of 40.5, and then a latency of 18 milliseconds to 19 milliseconds, which is really phenomenal latency when you're talking about satellites. So that's well below the latency thresholds for RDOFF. So they have a pretty good shot here at doing well. And where this is going to help them is it says here, what is it? I thought it was in this, but so one of the challenges for SpaceX is going to be the cost of these antennas, of these terminals, the UFO on a stick, and that's probably what is going to help fund this for them. So they don't have to go out and lay fiber, much less expensive, but they do have to provide these terminals to customers for a reasonable price, if not even give it to them if they can possibly do that. Something where you kind of use it while you have it. So they're a lot more expensive than something like a cable modem would be, or even a wireless receiver like you get for fixed wireless, because they've got a phased array antenna in them. because the way this works is, again, you've got this constellation of satellites that are above you, and what you're supposed to be able to do is take this terminal, this satellite receiver, this UFO on a stick. You're supposed to be able to stick it out a window or somewhere in your home, and then this phased array, probably using electronics, not a motor, I would think, but this phased array can then actually focus the beam and find these satellites. So once you stick it out there, it's going to automatically find a satellite that's passing over, and it's going to be able to, as these constellations of satellites are constantly passing over, you'll be able to track with them and get your internet. So that's pretty cool, but it's an expensive piece of equipment. So I think the RDOFF money is probably going to help defray the cost of that, of getting that technology into end users' hands. So this is really interesting. They can basically, once they get these satellites in there, they can hit anywhere in North America and eventually around the world. They're planning on getting like 16,000 of these satellites up at some point. And Elon Musk has come out and said it will work on trucks and trains. So there's places, I think in Sweden or somewhere, where these trains don't have any ability to get internet access when they're traveling. And he says even on a moving vehicle like this, these phased array antennas can track these satellites. So this is a big deal, and you'll be hearing more about it. And it's going to be interesting to see how well they do. It's very expensive. Launching these satellites is going to be something like $30 billion by the time they're all up there. And they only last like 6 years or something like that. So he's going to have to be constantly replacing these satellites. But you know, the fact that they can hit anywhere in North America, and all you need is line of sight to the sky, somewhere in the sky, then you've got a pretty good chance of making this service work. It's just mostly going to be, I think, for areas where fixed wireless is really, really difficult. You know, where it's hard to get a fiber line in, and it's hard to get a good wireless connection because you don't have line of sight to an antenna, that kind of thing. New York Public Service Commission approves Frontier's Chapter 11 plan. Frontier is in Chapter 11, and they're trying to exit, and New York has now approved that, as other states have. Frontier says it has received favorable approval from 10 of the 25 states in its footprint, and that includes Arizona, Georgia, Illinois, Minnesota, Nebraska, Nevada, New York, South Carolina, Utah, and Virginia. They're still waiting on some other states, including their home state of Connecticut, but this will get them out of bankruptcy, and they're targeting that early next year to exit that Chapter 11. And again, back to RDOFF, Frontier was one of the 386 companies that did qualify for that. And they're actually one of the companies that put in a lot of challenges, which most of those were not valid challenges. So they put in a ton of challenges. So I don't think the FCC probably approved a lot of those. But they did get the opportunity to bid in this, and they will certainly be doing that. Then we've got Verizon Business and Cisco bringing 5G-enabled MEC solutions to sports and entertainment venues. This is an edge computing kind of model using 5G. And says they're working together to offer solutions combining Verizon's 5G network and 5Edge to provide a safer in-person experience. So this is kind of related to the pandemic, and the idea is that the sports stadiums and people are not really there now, and how can we make them safe, and what can we do? And they're thinking, well, you know, we can use 5G in order to be able to provide quick access to people, you know, maybe with some Internet of Things kind of technology, quick access to people to bring them back in person, large crowd entertainment. New measures are needed in order to help make the experience more secure and enjoyable, including contactless physical access, social distancing, crowd management, wayfinding, and seamless payments. It's powered by Verizon's 5G ultra wide band, which really is millimeter wave. So when we talk about 5G, there's different spectrum that you can use for that, and the one that everybody was most excited about was millimeter wave, and that's the one that's the hardest to deploy widely. Now in a venue like this, where you've got, you know, you can have lots of little small cells, you can do millimeter wave, and it can be very fast and very low latency. So that's what they're looking at doing here. It says they can leverage analytics to estimate what wait times associated with lines in check-in, restrooms, concession stands, interfaces with digital signage and mobile applications to direct patrons to alternative locations with shorter lines. So that'd be kind of nice that you can check real quick on your app or something like that and see, okay, well, the bathroom over on this level is not too bad. And then by the time you get up there, maybe that's bad because everybody's checking it. It's kind of like when you're driving down the road with Google Maps and it tells you to go in a specific direction because the traffic's bad the way you're going, and then you switch to that way, and then by the time you get there, it's bad because everybody else did the same thing. So maybe that's the way it's going to work. I don't know. Identity crowd density managed crowd flows with the use of digital signage and messages to venue staff to help maintain social distancing standards. So again, it's a lot of it's related to the pandemic, but that's kind of the excuse, I think, and the way to get news for this. But they'll be able to use this. It'll just be a convenience regardless, whether there's social distancing or not. It'll be nice to have this kind of access in the stadiums. And then speaking of low latency, I talked about latency, the relatively low latency with satellite, the low Earth orbit satellites, and 5G can be very low latency. Now that edge computing that they were talking about, a lot of people are saying that's really where the low latency comes in, is pushing everything out to the edge. And that's part of what Verizon is doing I think in conjunction with Amazon, their server hosting service. But low latency is becoming a big deal in certain things, as we have some Internet of Things kinds of applications that need it. And gaming is really popular. And with gaming, you need low latency if you're going to do well. And there's some operators now that are looking at offering packages that would be more low latency, where they're going to kind of cater to those gamers. So it says here a handful of service providers across the globe have begun testing some very small tentative steps toward potentially major new sources of revenue, charging money for lower latency. So Cox is now offering an elite gamer plan that costs an extra $7 a month on some plans and promises to boost the speeds between gamers and their online games by as much as 32%. So in general, in an online game, it's not a lot of bandwidth, it's a lot of telemetry information. So a lot of times you're playing on a server somewhere and you're just having to transmit the telemetry information to that, and then the person you're playing against or people you're playing against are doing the same thing. They're transmitting their telemetry data. It's not that much information, but you need to get it there quick. So if you're shooting somebody and your latency is high, then maybe you get shot first. So in the gaming world, if you want to stay alive, you need low latency. So this is something that a lot of gamers would be willing to pay for. And you can see there's some other operators here that it mentions. Post in Luxembourg and Deutsche Telekom in Germany, CenturyLink, and they're looking at, CenturyLink says now offers 5 milliseconds of latency across 95% of the US. That's pretty amazing. And has begun some initial customers, tests for some initial customers, boasting of some initial customers for its edge computing service. This is small, hard to read. And Verizon's highlighting some of the initial users, including startup Zixi and YBVR. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that. It needs a vowel. Of its 5-edge computing service with Amazon Web Services. So that's similar to what we were just talking about in the stadiums, where they've got this edge computing service with Amazon Web Services to be able to provide that. Most such offerings don't yet have a strong connection to 5G, and as I was just saying, it's proximity to the edge that's the killer app, not necessarily 5G. So even if you don't have 5G, if you get close to the customer, if you get out to the edge with them, let's say through fiber, fiber deep in a cable plant or something like that, that's going to be part of what helps you with low latency. Most 5G providers have been focusing on deploying new 5G capable radios in their networks rather than the distributed computing functions that would support low latency connections. So they're right now, when they're talking about 5G and deploying that, they're not so much thinking about latency as much as they are as getting those 5G radios out there to get their 5G network going. Speaking of 5G, the average price for 5G phone drops. 5G phone ownership is on the rise. So nearly 1 out of every 7 smartphones sold in the US in August was 5G capable. This research said 14% of smartphones sold during the month were 5G devices, up sharply from 3% of 5G capable smartphones sold in January. So that is ticking up as there's more 5G spots out there. There's millimeter wave in certain cities that Verizon's doing, that they might do in Chicago and some other areas where they've got millimeter wave. And again, to do that, you need short distances, line of sight with these small cells to be able to get these really fast speeds with 5G. But T-Mobile is coming out nationwide 5G. They've got a lot of mid-band spectrum now that they're going to be deploying that on, not nearly as fast, but so 5G is going to be starting to take off now. There hasn't been really a reason for people to get it, and I think it's going to be a while still, because for most people, they're satisfied with 4G. So if they need a new phone, they'll look at one that's 5G, but probably they would not look at a 5G phone if it was a lot more expensive, unless somebody could sell them on the benefits of that. And the benefits of that are not quite here yet, but the prices are dropping. So, and we're also seeing that some operators that were saying, I think it might have been AT&T, that we're going to charge you more for 5G service have now said, nope, doesn't matter whether you get 4G or 5G, it's all going to be the same price. Dynamic spectrum sharing should increase competition between the carriers and continue driving down 5G smartphone ASPs. I guess that's average sales price, according to the research firm. So dynamic spectrum sharing, they're probably talking about CBRS, which is Citizen Broadband Radio Service, where they just had an auction of licenses for that for lots of different operators and different, both cable companies and mobile companies, wireless. So that is new mid-band spectrum that is now available. It's been available unlicensed, and now it's available in a licensed spectrum. And this dynamic spectrum sharing allows different types of tiers to use that. And they're going to be using that dynamic spectrum sharing probably in other spectrum that the FCC releases from time to time, like maybe C-band. That will probably use dynamic spectrum sharing as well. So it says we expect more OEMs to launch 5G devices as 5G chipsets continue moving down in price tiers. Carriers want most of their subscriber base on 5G networks and are pushing OEMs to launch more affordable 5G smartphones. So so the first ones that come out with 5G are your major phone manufacturers like Samsung, but now that prices are coming down on these chipsets, you're going to see more of these less expensive OEM phones coming out where you can maybe get a 5G phone for a lot less. So that's one of the things that's going to be driving down the price, not just the chipset, but then these OEM manufacturers taking advantage of that as well. And not to be outdone, as far as 5G and mobile, Comcast has symmetrical 1.25 gigabits per second in a move towards 10G. So 5G, fifth generation of wireless, and 10G, 10 gigabits per second down. And that 10G is the cable lab standard for DOCSIS. It's really DOCSIS 4.0. It's like a combination of different technologies that are supposed to push the envelope there and get people down to 10 gigabits per second, even full duplex. So Comcast says that it's achieved symmetrical 1.25 gigabits per second transmission on a live production network in Florida. Now that was just one home in Jacksonville. But that's a pretty good accomplishment because it's 1.25 in both directions. So they're doing this by using, again, different technologies that are associated with DOCSIS 4.0 and this 10G initiative, which are kind of the same thing. And one of those things is distributed access architecture, which has been around a while prior to DOCSIS 4.0, but that's where you take, again, that's pushing out to the edge, like I was talking about, where you're taking, in this case, they were using remote PHY devices, so an RPD or a remote PHY node, that's the physical layer of the cable plant, separated from the MAC layer in a CMTS. So normally you've got a CMTS that's got your MAC layer and your physical layer all sitting together in one box in your head end, and then you send your signal out, out into the field via HFC, hybrid fiber coax kind of plant. In this case, they're trying to push it out to the edge as much as possible, to node plus 0, where you've got a remote PHY device or remote MAC PHY device out in the field. And in this case, Comcast is using a virtual CMTS where they can run this on just standard x86 hardware. So rather than having to buy a big piece of iron, a CMTS from a CMTS manufacturer, they can just buy standard kinds of servers and put the CMTS software on there, and then they put these RPDs, these remote PHY devices, out in the field. And they actually had partnered with, I think this is probably being done in partnership with, what's the company? Harmonix. So Harmonix has a virtual cable OS platform. So again, it's software that you can run on x86 boxes. And Comcast was working with them closely, I think even investing in them, and then talking about, and they were working with them on coming out with their own virtual CCAP or virtual kind of CMTS that would be designed specifically for them. And then they were, at one point they were talking about making that available to other operators as well. I don't know how that's going to work, but in any event, that's what they're doing. So they're getting this 1.25 in both directions. So they're using this distributed access architecture, this DAA, and this virtual CCAP. And the fact that they're doing this in both directions mean that they're using full duplex DOCSIS, which is part of the DOCSIS 4.0 spec. And they're probably doing, actually, yeah, it says here fiber optics. So they're doing full duplex coherent optics. So they're using a couple of new technologies developed by Cable Labs where you're doing full duplex, plus also that's full duplex with over fiber, so you've got these signals going over fiber, and then probably coherent optics where they're using just one piece of fiber to go back and forth. It's really some interesting technology. And then lastly, I thought I'd bring up, if you haven't had enough reminders in Facebook and Twitter and whatever else on TV about the fact that it's time to vote, time to vote is coming up, and I thought I'd mention that Google has added new features to help voters find ballot boxes and polling stations, polling places. So in order to help voters find ballot drop boxes locations, Google has added new election-related features to Google Search and Google Maps. This became available last Friday. So you can search for early voting locations or ballot drop boxes near me, and then Google will pull up a little form, ask for your address, and then it will tell you where they are. Maybe. I tried it, and my location is not in there yet. So if your location is not in there, then they will link you to your state voting information, and it did. It linked me to my voter page where I could look up my polling place and all kinds of stuff, so that's good. But if once they get a location in there, then it will automatically tell you where they are, the closest one. You can navigate from there, just click on the map and navigate to it. So that's kind of a neat feature. Again, once the location is found, it'll give the user directions to a ballot box or voting location and provide information on voting hours. Hope they get that right. And then ahead of next month's election, they plan to list more than 200,000 voting locations across the U.S. And again, mine's not in there yet, but when it's not, they'll direct users toward the state and local election websites. So that's good. So make sure you go out to vote. I'm not going to tell you how to vote. I'd like to tell you how to vote, but I'm not going to tell you to vote. So that's up to you. But just go vote. That's your duty, and this is a very important election. So that's it for today. I hope this was helpful for you. Give me a thumbs up if you like this video. And I'm here every 3 o'clock or every Tuesday at 3 o'clock for Tech Tuesday. If you'd like to subscribe, just go ahead and hit the little subscribe button on the video. Again, give me a thumbs up if you like it. Make sure you click the bell to be notified whenever I'm live. And I will see you next week for Tech Tuesday. Take care.